Hello, good morning. My name is Karin Wells, and I'm here today to talk to you about my book, my new book. It's called The Abortion Caravan: When Women Shut Down Government in the Battle for the Right to Choose. There's the front cover and there's the back cover, which has on it a Volkswagen van, and that black thing you can see is a coffin that's on the top. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. First of all, many thanks to McNally Robinson for hosting this, partnering in this virtual book launch. I had really hoped to be in Winnipeg. The planes were all booked, but it wasn't to be. So there we are. Necessity is the mother of invention. Let me tell you about the caravan. The caravan was a group of people, 17 of them, young women, lefty young women, who in the late 60s, as this was, were intent on changing the world, as excuse me, many young people were at the time. They decided they wanted to build a national women's movement, a grassroots women's movement to unite women around a cause. And they decided that the cause that would mean the most to most women was abortion. It affected more women than anything else. But 1 in 4 families, they estimated, were affected by abortion. Across geographic boundaries, age boundaries, young women, older women who'd already thought they had their families and found themselves pregnant, rich women, poor women. Rich women had a better time of it, easier time, and often could get medically safe abortions. So this was the issue they chose. They got together and they traveled across the country in a Pontiac Parisienne convertible, a completely impractical vehicle to drive across the country, a pickup truck, and that Volkswagen bus. And on the top of it was the coffin. The coffin was there because it symbolized the deaths, the numbers of women every year who died from illegal abortions. And because abortion was not legal at the time, it had been slightly legalized in a very limited number of cases in 1969, women were forced to go to backstreet abortionists and to use all manner of methods to try to abort themselves. So that was the big point they were making. 1,000 to 2,000 women a year died as a result of illegal abortions. They traveled across the country. They stopped at, I think, 10 different towns. They slept on the basement floors of United Churches. United Church was very on board with this. They staged guerrilla theater. They had rallies. And by the time they got to Ottawa, they were 500 strong. They were intent on marching on government, if you like, the Liberal government of the day. Pierre Trudeau was the Prime Minister, Justin's father. And they had sent them all letters saying, we demand, we don't ask, we demand that abortion be taken out of the criminal code. When they got to Ottawa, no one from government was there, no Liberal member of Parliament. 3 NDP MPs came to meet them, including Lord Nystrom, Saskatchewan, then the youngest member in the House of Commons. And there's a legendary photograph of him and his wife, Gail Nystrom, standing outside the House of Commons, and she is indicating her support by wearing this little sign that they all wore around their waists. It said, "This uterus is not government property. Can't tell us what to do." So what they did after government didn't meet with them is that they went back to the school where they were staying. They met, 200 of them, and they reached a decision and hatched a plan that they would invade, as it were, the galleries of the House of Commons. They had to get forged passes from members of Parliament or from their assistants who were friends of the women who worked on the Hill, who did a little purloining of passes and forging of signatures. And they got themselves into the galleries. They chained themselves to their seats. They started a speech, and when a guard came to take away one of them, another woman would take up the speech, stand up. Guard said they were popping up all over the place, and they were. They were effective, really effective. They were loud enough, persistent enough, that eventually the speaker had to close down the session of Parliament. And that was their triumph. The next day, they were on the front page of every newspaper in the country. They had put the issue on the table. They had said, you've been dismissing this. You've said this doesn't count. Yes, it does. This is what we'll do. And that's what they did. Every place they went, something different happened. There were little adventures, if you like, along the way. And each town was separate and distinct. In Saskatchewan, they doubled the number of women on the caravan, added another car, more women actually flew into Ottawa later on. Saskatchewan was very important. I'm going to read you a bit from the book to try and give you a sense of what was going on. This is the thing to remember, that only 8 years before, in 1962, the caravan women came through in 1970. 8 years before, Saskatchewan had introduced Medicare. It was one of the most fierce battles for any social issue ever in English Canada, because the doctors reacted by going on strike. Doctors didn't want any of this at the time. And it was a tremendous battle. It was the parents of the young women in the caravan who joined in Saskatchewan who were very much part of that fight. Let me read you this little bit. Doctors in Saskatchewan were bitterly opposed to state-funded health insurance. And while the bill was being introduced in the legislature, they announced that they would not cooperate with government and resolved to strike. On July 1st, 1962, the day that Medicare became effective, more than 90% of Saskatchewan doctors closed their offices and threatened to leave the province. Groups of anti-Medicare mothers in Regina, encouraged by the doctors and opposition politicians, organized Keep Our Doctors Committee, and protest rallies on both sides of the issue proliferated. It was all but civil war in Saskatchewan. Athol Murray, the infamous hockey priest campaigning with the doctors against Medicare, said this thing may break into violence and bloodshed any day now, and God help us if it doesn't. People were running scared. Holding the barricades on the other side was a core group of organizers and Medicare supporters that included Edgar Mahood and his friend Stan Rance. It's important to point out that daughters of both those men were part of the Abortion Caravan. They set up co-op health clinics, community clinics that would provide emergency medical care and show that there was another way to deliver health care. The Saskatoon Community Care Clinic opened the day Medicare was proclaimed and the doctor's strike called. It wasn't much more than an empty room in an old building with scrounged and improvised equipment. They put mattresses on folding tables and called them examining tables. There were 2 telephones, 2 doctors. Neither of those doctors went home until midnight that first day. Now, one of those doctors was Margaret Mahood, wife of Edgar, obviously a doctor. She was one of the 2 doctors on duty the day the clinic opened. Both were women. Tough, principled, Margaret Mahood was given security escorts on house calls throughout the strike. She became involved in the abortion issue because as the limited reforms were brought in, what happened was that women could apply for abortions, apply to a panel of doctors, perhaps 1% were given permitted legal abortions. That's how things were. And she was part of that because she became a psychiatrist, one of the infinitesimal number of women psychiatrists in the country. And she became directly involved in those abortion issues. As a psychiatrist, she sat on the committee at her Saskatoon hospital. Sally Mahood, her daughter, who continues to practice medicine in Saskatchewan, she remembers her mother dictating her opinions for the committee's consideration at home on a Sunday night, beside herself over the cases she was seeing. Application for an abortion by a 12-year-old girl who was raped by her 16-year-old brother. Was there any question? Why was there any question that this girl could have an abortion? Why did she have to ask a committee of doctors? And that was the point. They went on from Regina. I mean, this is part of history, and I also want to thank the Feminist History Society, who have backed a series of publications telling women's stories that would be otherwise lost to our Canadian history. They went on to Regina, had a grand time in Regina, a great sense of sisterhood, if you like. And the RCMP was following them all the way. So there are, the files have now been opened after application. There are RCMP reports from every single one of these cities describing the women, describing what they were doing. Everybody knew they were coming. And they then went on to Winnipeg. And in Winnipeg, well, more women had joined the caravan, as I said, with their new caravan of 4, not 3 vehicles, and teaching the new drivers how to drive in convoy. That was something else as well. They arrived in Winnipeg in time to give a press conference and have a rally in the basement of the Manitoba Student Co-op Housing Association. They hinted again, this time to the Winnipeg media, that they were thinking of something a little more militant than a straightforward demonstration in Ottawa, which is, of course, what happened, was something considerably more militant. The RCMP's man from Winnipeg reported back to Ottawa, the Vancouver women were very radical, and they had the idea and possibly they would be busted by the police for their actions in Ottawa. This did not appear to worry them because they felt it would be for the good of the cause. The informant had read the women well. They carried with them a nobility of purpose that continued all the way through to Ottawa. It was the same feeling that had motivated the initial group of students who formed the Women's Caucus and then the Abortion Caravan in Vancouver. Those women had run an abortion referral service, and they felt, we are doing the right thing. Surely the world will see that and nothing will happen to us. During that Winnipeg press conference, they chirped out the phrase, we are declaring war on government, which is something they've been saying all along. And predictably, they were asked, what does that mean? One of the women said, we're going to be on the move. We won't stop. We won't sit down and do it nicely. We are going to give as much publicity and make as much trouble as we possibly can. And there were other women who thought it meant even more than that. Both dailies, the Winnipeg Free Press and the Winnipeg Tribune, which existed back then, gave them good coverage. More newspaper coverage meant more people at the rallies. It also aroused curiosity and interests. People, particularly women who would never come to a rally, found out from a safe distance what the caravan was all about, what the women were attempting to do. One moment stayed with Marcy Cohen, who's one of the leaders of the caravan, years after the caravan was over. I think of a waitress in Winnipeg, she said. We were having coffee and we went to pay. And she said, no, you guys have free coffee. You're doing something really important. She had heard about it in the paper. So newspaper coverage became extremely important. Just a word on the context of the time. This was a period of confrontation. You didn't negotiate reform. There was, change wasn't achieved over a chat. You fought for it. And this was what they were all about. They were all about pushing boundaries, coloring outside the lines, taking to the streets. And Saskatchewan women had learned that worked during the Medicare doctor strike. And it raises the question, when is that the right thing or an appropriate thing, if you like, to do? So the book is called The Abortion Caravan by me, Karin Wells, and it's available at your independent bookstores across the country and in other places too. But let's support our independent bookstores. Thank you. Bye-bye.